All right, we got another episode of Lessons in Loss, Love and Resilience here. I'm Arik Housley, and many of the people know my story that we lost our daughter in a mass shooting in 2018. And this is my attempt to try to get people to have conversations around the loss, love, and resilience in their life, and how we can continue to move forward, not move on. So, with that, I have a friend, Kelsey, here with me today. So I'm super excited to get Kelsey on here, both on what she does and just in her normal day to day life with her and her family, and then also what she does in her occupation. So, Kelsey, thanks for joining me, and love having you on.
Yay, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here, and I love that you are facilitating this conversation. It's an important one.
Thanks. It's funny because I've known Sean, your husband, for quite a few years, and you guys do this. You get filters, water filters around the world to help get clean water and such, which has always been one of those things. Like, how can we not just help people get water, right? It's so standard, and I love what you guys are doing with it. So when I ran into Sean the other day, and then he told me what you do as an occupation, I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I want to talk to her. So, and I know we've talked
Yes.
about it before. I forget. I forget a lot. I'm the husband, right? I'm sure Sean does the same.
Yeah, mom brain is real too, so I forget a lot as well. So here we are.
So, Kelsey, what do you do as an occupation, and in terms of your day to day? That I know your role as a death doula. What exactly is that, and what does that entail?
Yeah. So, as a death doula, I have two major things that I do. I walk with people who are nearing the end of their life, and I try to create safe spaces for families to both process their grief and to have the really hard conversations. Um, and then I walk with people who are not terminal, who are not dying, who want to get to know their relationship with death better, who kind of want to confront the realities, the fears that we have around death, because we live, specifically in America, we live in a death denying culture. So how do we have these hard conversations? How do we look death in the face, as scary as it is? Um, and how do we start
That,
to process?
that's amazing. So, I knew like the concept of you're helping somebody almost like hospice, but in the opposite way,
Yeah.
where you've got the doula in the home giving birth, right? Helping somebody have a birth in their own home in their bed or whatever. But then the death doula, I'm like, okay, I get it. But people actually hire you to walk them through the process, even though they're not sick or going.
Yeah, and it's like one of my favorite parts of the work that I do, um, because the clients that I've had who are facing death and on their deathbed, one of the biggest regrets is I wish I would have thought about this. If I would have recognized that I was going to die sooner, how might I have lived a little differently if I looked death in the face? And so being able to walk with people who are not imminently dying, um, is really beautiful work because we start that process sooner and then we can live more conscious lives the more we are aware of our mortality. So,
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Well, and I think that was, I still have conversations with a lot of people in and around my life and my family and friends that, after losing Elena the way we did, I'm in a very different mindset where I'm not afraid to die in that way because there's been plenty of things that have happened, signs to me that I know that I will see her again, just not in this body, and
yes.
I totally mind blown of things that have happened. So, but I think my mindset, similar to yours, in whichever way that is I've wrapped my head around that, and I live differently every day because of it. Like I make
100%.
sure, I make sure the things that need to be said are said. Like every time I see my parents or even my son when Alex leaves, it's always like, all right, bye, I love you, and like we always say it because it's one of those things like it shouldn't go unsaid, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so
Yeah,
that's.
absolutely. When we encounter death, everything changes.
Mhm.
And you guys have experienced this in a really real way, obviously. It awakens us. It's like the veil has lifted, and all of a sudden, all the things that we can worry about are put into a different light. And priorities shift, values shift. And it doesn't mean all of a sudden, we don't prioritize things we shouldn't. Like, we're still human, but there's this deep knowledge that I think is birthed in recognizing that as I walked with my dad who was dying, a deep realization that that's going to be me one day.
Right.
None of us can escape this reality.
Yeah.
So this is it. How do I really live my life in this beautiful, loud, loving way? Because this is it.
Yeah. It's funny because I literally, like, a couple weeks ago, I was sitting outside barbecuing, and it just kind of, this epiphany came to me, and call it whatever you want to call it, but I just was like, look, what if our time here is just to be able to sense and enjoy the senses, the sights, the smells, the love, the laughter, right? And how do you balance that? Because our time here is, it's almost like a gift, right? Where
Oh
you
yeah.
look and go like, hey, these are gifts that you're able to do that. So how amazing is it to be able to walk and you see, you know sound however, like, hummingbirds just flying right up to you, or certain smells of that food when you just guys came back from Vietnam or wherever you were traveling, right? So there's things that, even the bad smells, that you're like, they're still, these are sensations that make
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
this is sensational, like, right? So how did you get, so your father passed, is that how you got into this industry, or
It
so
is.
why don't you tell me that story?
I was already studying the contemplative path, which is this really, really all it is trying to live with awareness. And so on that journey, it really helped me go into my dad's death with a lot of awareness. And then after he died, I was like, okay, I have a lot to learn here. It was a whirlwind experience, and I wanted to sit with the gems that came out of it with a deeper understanding. And so I went back to school and studied death work. So I would say absolutely my dad's death led me into this work.
So how do you where do you go to school to study death work? Like,
Yeah,
hold on,
there's,
I've got a new major. It
yeah,
was
yeah.
political science, it's now death work.
Yes, there's so many different programs now. It's really beautiful because, like birth doulas, like you said, it's a pretty well known thing. But it's becoming more and more popular. This idea of sitting with death, even though we're like, it's kind of new, kind of scary. So there's actually a lot of programs. I went to the Conscious Dying Institute. And it was just a really beautiful program where we confronted our own death, and we worked with nurses and educators who just trained us in what it might look like to sit with death in a really present way, accepting all the realities, right? So accepting the immense grief and the pain that accompanies death, but also the love, also the radical, eye-opening nature of death. So it's this non-dual approach to death, where we can see that maybe death isn't all dark and glooming, and obviously death is not all love. There's also pain, and there's also deep, deep sorrow and anger and all the complexities that rise. This program really helps us see death from an expansive stance. Um, so yeah, I loved it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so I saw something recently, and it was that kind of, the moment with Anderson Cooper interviewing Stephen Colbert, where he's like, what you've seen it, I can tell by your
Yes,
reaction.
yes, yes.
And it's like, what act is not a gift from God, good and bad, right? And both of them, I
Yes.
think, lost their parent at 10, at the age of 10, and I think Anderson Cooper, maybe his brother as well, in a plane crash or something. And so you look at it and go, like, and I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, I feel so blessed that we had Elena for 18 years. Like, even that little amount of time, that I see friends who lose their child at 3, or some people unable to have a child, and I go, gosh, I was so lucky with my 18 years. And some people look at me like, how do you think that? And I'm like, well, because tomorrow's not promised. Today is one less day that we're going to be on this earth, whatever that is. And I
Yeah,
think it's,
totally.
yeah, I think it's, to me, I look, in some ways, it's that fear. Like, it's a scary movie, right? Why does it all of a sudden it go dark and the sounds stop? Because you're like, oh my gosh, it's about to blast me out and I'm going to freak out, right? And there's kind of a similarity with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you guys, it seems like you've tapped in to this really like healing and honest space where I'm sure you still have the days where you're like, how did this happen? And I'd do anything to change it. And, you know, just crippled by the pain. Yet also holding space for the days where you're like, okay, like this is my one life and I'm gonna live. And almost even in tribute to Elena, right? Like this, okay, I'm gonna live my life and I'm gonna experience joy because that's what she would have wanted. And but being able to hold the complexity there, um, is hard. We tend to want to choose a side as
Yeah.
humans, right? And
Yeah.
so it's really easy to be like, okay, I'm gonna choose the dark side and I'm not gonna live anymore because when this person that I love died, I died. So it'd be easy to go down that path. And then in the other sense too, you know, ignoring death and just, you know what, I'm never going to think about it. I'm not going to think about what happened and I'm just going to move on and not look towards death and I'm just going to live my life and ignore death. That's another path. So how do we hold both? How do we move forward and choose love, um, and hold space for pain and joy?
Yeah. It's no, I love it. And I think it's funny because when you said that, it just kind of hit me in a way. A lot of people ask me if what I do is healing to me, right? And it's funny because I don't know that I've ever described it as healing because I don't do it for like some people have said, oh, to keep Elena's name alive. And I'm like, honestly, that's not why I do it because at that point that she lives with us forever, right? I think the difference is I think I see it in I remember in her funeral in the memorial service, quite a few people getting up, students that I knew of but I didn't know them, and people that have spoken to me since that have said, Elena came to me. It's at school. I was sitting by myself. I didn't have any friends, and she's like, "Come on,
Mm,
let's," like she just went out of her way to show that friendship and joy and love. And so now I look at it and go like, how can I do that? And I never really I didn't realize or register why I was doing it in some ways. So
yeah.
that could very much be, for me, it's more of the fulfillment of, especially as a man, right? There's a lot of, men trying to put on that tough persona.
Hmm.
But just people talking about that death is, what death and taxes, right? We're not getting out of this. So how do we live every day to our fullest, and how do you, have those conversations with people? Because is it really important that you dug your feet in and you were right and your brother or sister was wrong and you don't, you haven't talked to them in 10 years, and some, what, sometimes for some people it is and they have to live with it, and that's okay, right? It's not, we each have our own journey, so
We do. We each have our own journey. And that's a big part of the work too, is how we interact with grief is so unique to each of us, right? And so how do we encourage one another? And I think what you're pointing at is being vulnerable with each other, right? How do
correct.
we show the tender places of our heart that, are messy because grief is messy? How do we honor one another's grief journey because they can be vastly different?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And that's why, a lot of families after experiencing grief, it's so easy for them to have fractures in their relationships because we
Hmm.
can easily jump to judging each other and, well, how could this person respond like that? And, how could they not be doing this or doing that? And really, there's something that is really beautiful about switching the narrative and saying, recognizing, okay, I'm going to process this way and they're processing this way. And hopefully along the way, we can have some vulnerable moments where we connect amidst our differences. Um,
100%. It's funny that you say that because a very good friend of mine, we ended up getting seated next to each other at a little annual event, and we got to talking, and she had lost her mom, and she got, she was a little emotional about it. It had been like 7 or 8 years, and she says, and my sister and I, it's kind of driven a rift between us, and she was saying like how her sister wasn't like emoting, like she wasn't
right, right.
showing that vulnerability. And I just looked at her and I said, look, we all do this different, so you can't judge her that she should respond the way you do because maybe she sees how emotional you are and she's trying to be strong for you, but then behind closed doors, she's having her own time. And I said, and she just kind of looks at me like, wow. And since then, I know I remember speaking to her and she said that her and her sister had kind of rekindled, but it was her kind of judging her sister on,
Yeah,
you're
totally.
not doing this right. You know, you're
Yep.
not doing this the way I would think we would do it. And who would know?
Yeah. It's easy to do.
Yeah.
It's really easy to do.
What do you, so do you, I mean, I would imagine you have a million stories of your job in terms of this, I'd say this vocation that you've chosen, or it's chosen you, however you want to look at it. What are some stories of just of how you've been with people? Like how does it work really?
Um, hmm.
And privacy wise, obviously you don't have to, you know what I mean? Like,
No, 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 absolutely. I mean, I love talking about these stories. I think a huge part of the grief journey um, is sharing stories with one another.
yes.
So there's one woman who holds a super special place in my heart. I was able to walk with her for a longer period than I usually am with people. Her body did not want to let go. And so um, being able to walk with her and her daughter through the process was really beautiful. And with a lot of older generation, she was a woman in her 80s. It's really hard to talk about tender, vulnerable things at times. So I think something that's really beautiful is just giving people the space that they need and not forcing our own desires and wishes on them during the dying process. So being able to sit with her and ask questions, but also it's really important to listen to what you're sensing from other people. So we were able to dig into a few different things, but and that was enough for her, you
Mhm.
know? So boundaries on the deathbed are really sacred things. Um, it's not showing up with our own agenda can often cause a lot more pain and suffering to people rather than showing up with our presence. So, what I talk about a lot with people is active listening. So, sitting with people and instead of being in our brain, like, okay, which is what we do every day of our lives, right? Like, what am I going to say next? Or how can I bring up this one thing I really want to talk about? And rehearsing in our mind what we want to say versus actively listening to the people we're with. Um, so on the deathbed, one of the greatest gifts we can people give people is actively listening, just being present with them and allowing the conversation to unfold in a natural way. And it doesn't mean we can't bring up things we don't want to bring up, but it means bringing them up in a way that honors the person we're sitting in front of, that honors their boundaries and what they're willing to discuss. Um, so I had some really beautiful moments with this one woman where she was able to just share with me some really funny stories. And I'm somebody who loves to dig into like the deeper things. And I'm like, I want to sit with like these childhood wounds and I want to sit, let's uncover what's inside. And something that death has taught me is the importance of play. And what we really bonded over was being able to laugh over some of these joyful stories in her life.
Mhm.
She didn't want to really dig into a lot of the painful stuff. And that's okay, you know? So she was able to just laugh and tell me these great stories. For one of them, for years, she wore these little leaf earrings and necklace. She's a sweet woman. She wore them everywhere. Little did she know they were marijuana earrings in a necklace, and she didn't find out till much later. She's like, I'm just walking around wearing these beautiful earrings, and she had no idea. So there's just these tender moments that unfold out of presence,
Yes.
and they're not
Yeah.
always what we think they'd look like, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So you don't, I mean, it's, I guess when you're hired to do this, obviously they want you there because they know that this is happening, like especially on when the
Yes.
ones that are dying are in the
Yes.
process. So sometimes it just doesn't, you don't go in and go like, so are you afraid or is this scary? Because if it doesn't come up, you just go with it. Is that what you're
So
saying?
So there are conversations that what I'm saying is that we all have intentions. Okay? We all have hopes. And so I hold those intentions, which would be to sit with somebody and maybe discuss, their fears and their thoughts around death, their belief systems around death. But instead of going into the conversation and that being my main priority is presence and to be there and to love them. And then if there are openings, then absolutely I
Yeah.
can facilitate those conversations.
Yeah.
But it's just a shift in priorities. So my priority is not my agenda. My priority is presence, and then there's space to have these conversations.
Love it. What have you ever, I mean, I'm always interested in like NDEs and like I've had instances with speaking with a medium and we've had plenty of signs and things that have happened like for us that kind of blew. I mean, Hannah drove through a rainbow one day, like literally drove through a rainbow. She was just losing it. She comes out. This is a few months after she'd gone back to work. And, like she gets in the car and she just kind of breaks down. She turns on the car and Lord, I Need You by Matt Maher, a good friend of ours and a future, he's going to be on my podcast coming up, comes on. She's like, okay, I hear you, and
Yeah.
then she starts to drive and literally there's a rainbow that she drives through the rainbow. And she's like, what just happened? Right.
Yeah.
Because rainbows always move for me, like, right. They're always somewhere far away. But it was one of those moments. Have you had things like that or
Yeah,
any like,
absolutely. So obviously my dad's death was the most tender um, experience for me. And so I had a lot of moments where I experienced, you know, these supernatural, these mysterious things. And I would say the most poignant one was after my dad died, I had a dream about him. And it was, I don't, I don't know if you've experienced this, but it was one of those things where, after someone dies, to hear their voice again
Mhm.
is like the most powerful and realistic thing. So I woke in my dream and my dad was standing in front of me and I just ran to him and it took a while and I just was running to him, crying, and I just finally embraced him and I held him so tight. And I am an existential thinker, so I had all these questions like, where are you? And what is the meaning of life? And I was in so much pain, like the most pain I've ever experienced. And so I'm just weeping hysterically, like, why am I in this pain? How am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to live without my dad, who's my best friend? How am I supposed to live and walk throughout life without you? And he looks at me and with this really gentle face, he pulls me up off the ground and he looks me in my eyes and he says, Kelsey, don't forget you're alive.
Right.
You're alive. And he's like, I want you to play. And then boom, I woke up in my sleep. And it, in my soul, like there's so much mystery about being human. But in my heart, I'm like, that was my dad. It
Yeah.
was a message from him. And it was this deep reminder that I needed where in midst my pain and amidst all these questions that were crushing me at the time, like I didn't know how to live anymore after his death. Like, who am I even in the world without the love of my father? Um, it was this reminder from him directly to Kelsey, play. Don't forget. Have fun. That amidst the heaviness, there's lightness there as well.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How old were you when he passed?
I
Was
was
it a,
30.
you were 30? Okay. So like 2 years ago. Um,
No.
so, um, yeah, that's awesome. It's funny. I was watching, I don't know, something came on YouTube probably, and it was Matt Damon, who I don't know why I've always just really liked him. And just seems very genuine, right, as an individual, right? Which sometimes with celebrities, you don't seem like you see that. And he was talking and he described a moment in his dream where he could feel his father's embrace
Yeah.
after his father. I don't know if you've seen that interview or
No, I
whatever.
haven't.
It was really interesting because I remember It wasn't long after, but I remember. So sometimes, if I was, because I would work early in the morning, Elena would come in and say goodnight, and she would come in and kind of like half lay on top of me from the side of the bed, like a side hug kind of, um, and and I remember in my dream, literally, I felt her. I didn't hear her, but I felt her, and I literally felt the embrace, and then I woke up just like weeping.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments of that sensation that was just so real to me that these are those moments when people tell me, oh, none of those things are real, those signs or whatever. And I look at them, I go, it doesn't have to be real for you. Like, you don't have to believe it. I
Right.
know in my
Yeah.
heart that it did. And if nothing else, even for like Hannah all of a sudden sees hummingbirds everywhere. Like, it's like that for if it makes you smile and reminds you of that person you love, it doesn't matter. Like, that's what's important,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think they're these really beautiful gifts. And I think after death, we are extra sensitive and extra aware, you know? So I view them as gifts.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. You, you and I were chatting before we started the podcast, that in terms of signs that have happened. Now, obviously, your father coming to you in your dream, in a way. Have there been other things that you've had, or people that you've worked with, where they've had things happen, like after,
Yeah, I would say during the dying process, being with people who are approaching death, I think it's really a powerful thing that I would say the majority of people see loved ones who have already died. And so the interesting thing about this is they're not seeing like a loved one who's in the other room, right? They're talking to a loved one who has already died. And this has happened with multiple clients and with my dad as well. Talking to his mom, talking to his dad, talking to his friend who died years ago. So I find that really beautiful and comforting,
Yeah.
to think of, hey, death is a mystery, and none of us who are alive have died. So, so we don't really know how it all works, and we have our hopes and we have our beliefs, but we can't fully know. And so the thought that our loved ones would gather around us who've already journeyed through death at the end of our lives, I think is really beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have always like wondered that kind of scenario too, like at the final, minutes when you hear about people seeing that, right? And it's so easy to just chalk it up to going, well, they're just, like they're losing it right now, like
Right, right.
and you go like, well, are they? Like, maybe they're seeing it a lot clearer than we are, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
and it's funny. I had spoken back in July at the Compassionate Friends Network to like 1,000 people up in Seattle, and when I was up there, somehow it came up and people were talking about feathers, and I was like, I don't know. I've never really had like feathers, right? Like, so, sure, okay. I'm gonna tell myself, you know what? I'm gonna see some feathers, right?
Uh-huh.
Not kidding you. So I had to leave the next morning on Saturday morning. We had Alex was supposed to go back to England, and we also had like our regional final game for the soccer team, and I had to help. So I fly back. I get to the field. I'm not kidding. I walk out to the field, and it looked like something had attacked a bird on the field, like on the field where we had to go clean it up. There were white feathers everywhere, like all in
Why?
one pocket, like in this one
Yeah,
area of the field. But we've never, in 8 years, we've never had, like that, right? Maybe there was a
yeah,
feather on the field or something, you wouldn't notice it. But I mean, there was probably 500 all in
yeah,
this area on the field. And I just started laughing. I'm like, okay, what? And again, doesn't need to be real to anybody, but it made me
yeah.
smile. And
Yes, totally. It's all just such a mystery. My brother saw a feather, and my brother is a very realistic type guy. He's like, I don't know, Kelsey, I don't know about some of this stuff you say you experience. But on my dad's deathbed, he saw there was a feather in the room floating. And so there's these patterns, right? There are these things that aren't these solo experiences. There are these human experiences that groups have. Um, and it's beautiful. If it's there to comfort us, wonderful. I'll take it.
yeah, exactly. It's, and it's, I, that's what's fun about hearing your story say those things, because those are those moments that some people, as they are nearing this part of their life, or as they're getting older, I mean, we're all getting a day closer, that you turn and go like, okay, maybe this isn't as scary as it needs to be.
Yeah.
And if you can embrace that, if you can embrace that vulnerability. I love it. I always tell people I love the Brene Brown quote, and I'll probably butcher it, but it's basically vulnerability is courage. Like some of the most vulnerable people are warriors, going like soldiers going into war, right? Because they don't know if they're going to make it through.
Yeah.
And so you look and go like, wow, the opportunity to be vulnerable and to embrace it um, is very freeing in so many ways. um,
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of it is, it's really like unveiling the stereotypes that we have around death, because we're raised in a culture where death is this creepy skeleton with a black hood on, and it's this mysterious force that we're taught to fear. So how do we unveil death? One of my good friends, his brother was just diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And so his brother is on his deathbed currently. And we were talking about death this past week. And he said, I was sitting with what's happening. And he's like, I felt like death came to me and apologized. He said, I felt like death was saying, I'm so sorry. I don't want to cause you pain, but I'll help lead your brother through. Like, what if death isn't this really scary thing, but death is this loving presence that's there to help guide us to wherever it is, right? What if we don't need to fear death? And of course, we all have our fears, and we'll experience that part of being human, but what if there's comfort in the presence of death as well? What if it's both?
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And really, if you when you describe it as that, I mean, we've grown up that death was affiliated with the Grim Reaper, right? I mean, that was, like these scary, and then you think of it in the sense of, the an angel instead, or somebody that's there to guide you in that. And I know there was the medium that I spoke to a few times, blew my mind with some of the things that she said. And one of the things, one time she got extremely emotional. She goes, I'm so sorry, like, because she I guess tuned into what happened.
Yeah.
And she said when it happened, Elena had like these beings around her helping her, like absorb that pain in that moment, and be there and guide her. And I mean, it just kind of, but she was so, like, she literally got super emotional. She's like, I'm really sorry, I just need a second. Like, she was, and it makes you just think like, maybe that is the case, versus, and the fact that she died, in a mass shooting. You look and go like, how painful, this must have been so painful, this, like, and maybe that's, again, these are the things we just don't know. Like, it's all what we've been told. And I see people that have, like these long bouts with cancer or things, and you go, gosh, like, it's actually a gift to relieve them of this pain. It's not what we planned. Like, we didn't plan to outlive our child, right? um, and I think those are the moments that really make you understand that it's just not, we're not in control here.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a point for a lot of people when they're walking with people who are dying where, initially the prayer or the outcry is, please save this person, please heal this person. And then the prayer becomes, please take them, please and heal them, right? So death
Take them
also
from
as
this pain.
healer for those who are in immense pain is a reality for a lot of families.
Yeah. Yeah, and ultimately, there, when you're in the room, typically we know that this is the inevitable, right? So do you in your, I mean, I would assume that people that have the financial ability to pay for a doula in this scenario, they're obviously in a place where have you found that it's more the children hiring to help them,
Yes.
or the individuals hiring for their children, if that makes
It's usually the children, but some families have, funds set up for end of life care. But it's usually the kids who are wanting to have some more support for the end of life process.
and it's for the kids for the person who's passing to support the.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, 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 yes,
Because
exactly.
I would assume the kids are also very much a part of the process if they
Well,
want.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
if they want to be.
Yeah.
Do you find more often than not they're also wanting to be, or do you think a lot of people are like, I can't do it. You know.
There's both. There's absolutely a mix. Some families are super hands off and some families are really hands on. I try to, again, listen to people's boundaries, but I will extend the invitation for the whole family to engage in ways that they feel comfortable with. It's a huge part of our own healing process, being able to be in the room when we can show up. And so even inviting, like, I don't only invite the adults to be involved, I invite the kids to be involved. Because so often we want to shield our kids from death and we want to protect them from pain. But what ends up happening is death becomes more and more scary because it's more and more of a mystery. It's this thing that's hiding in the closet. So how do we invite kids from a young age to sit with death and and to hold space for both the fact that yes, it can be scary and you're right, you know, um, and we're not going to force you to show up in the room, right?
Right.
But if you're curious, then let's have the conversation.
Right.
I've had kids go in the room and pick rose petals and help bathe their family members as they're laughing and splashing water, and it's, you know, this beautiful, both tender and joyful experience.
Yeah.
I, I really encourage families to invite their kids into the conversation so they can grow up with a healthier reality of death or a healthier relationship with death.
It's funny that you say that because a couple of weeks ago was the shooting in Minnesota, and a lot of people always ask like, how is this for you? And then one of the people that I know, she kind of made a comment like her son or daughter on the way to school asked about like started asking, and she goes, I just didn't know what to say, and my response, it was in a group that we're with, and I my response was as a long time ago when I was came home from work one day and was exhausted. I wanted to turn on something that I'd fall asleep to, and Oprah's on. I'm like, fine, whatever. And it was like a psychiatrist or a psychologist who said, don't lie to your children. Like
Yeah,
if they're 5 and they ask you about how babies are made, you say, well, mommy and daddy sleep together, and they love each other. And then if that's enough, be done. You don't
right,
have to
right.
go into the details of intercourse, right?
Totally.
And
Yes,
so
totally.
when I gave that example, then I said my suggestion to you would be is don't lie to them. So if your child is 6 or 7, and just say sometimes people do bad things, and we just have to, we have to just, pray for that family, or we just have to live each day and try to be nice to people in hopes other people don't do that. At 8, they'll be like, sometimes these, and so but you don't want to lie to them, and you also can't put them in this bubble because this is also our reality,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
um
totally. And there's a lot of phrases that just cause actually a lot of confusion for kids. So like when somebody dies, it's an easy thing to say like, oh, they're in a better place. But there are case studies of kids who then think that the loved one moved away. And then months later are asking, so when are we going to see so and so? So really, like what you're saying is so vital to be honest with kids, and even using the word death and died with kids um, to help them process and to hold space for them as vital roles in
yeah,
the experience as well.
yeah, I give the example when, so the morning that we found out, we waited to wake up Alex because we were trying to, find out, and then we decided we booked our flights to fly down to Southern California to go to Thousand Oaks. And we woke up Alex, and I mean, obviously we're in tears, and we're like, hey, and he's, what, Dad, what's going on? And I was like, there's been an accident. And he's like, is Elena okay? And I said, we don't think so. And then it wasn't long later, but at one point, not long later, he says to me, Dad, this wasn't an accident. You told me it was an accident. Now
Mm,
he was 14, so he's processing it different. And I know he had read some stuff online. We chose not to know details because none of that changed the outcome for us.
yeah.
But all of a sudden, I was like, wow, we really do need to be honest with them and say, and talk about these things because they are real. For you, you have young ones. How do you, as a parent, like you just have like around the dinner table, hey, let's talk about death, guys.
We, um, there's two things that are coming up for me. First, I want to respond to your story because, um, first off, just so much love to you guys and all that you've experienced. And there's so much grace for all of us. And so there are things that I did with my kids while my dad was dying that in retrospect, I'm like, maybe I would have done that a little bit differently. We all are working with what we know. So I love to steep the death experience for all of us in all the grace in the world. That like we really are working with what we know and we're all doing our best. Um, and yeah, there's just so much grace for all of us. And secondly, with being a death doula, the conversation does come up quite a bit. Um, and we just like to like view death as this experience and opportunity to honor life. So if we're walking down the street and there's, a dead squirrel, then my kids will be like, "Oh, like let's give thanks for the squirrel's life." And I'm like, "Are you guys going to be these like weird kids who like
Well,
who
knowing their
are
father, they very well could be.
yes,
Like
yes,
that's
yes, who are like extra aware of death and like, "Oh, let's honor this moment." But no. Um it comes up. It does.
that's awesome. That's
And
awesome.
kids are so smart though. Like the things that my kids have said about death to me have been like these powerful experiences where I'm like, kids are a lot more capable of understanding things than I think we think at times.
Yeah. We don't give them enough credit to do it. And
Yeah.
then when we're so busy shielding them that,
Yes.
like I'm like, during all of the COVID chaos, there were so many people trying to over shield their children from like, oh, well, they deserve more now because they've had to deal with this. And I mean, I remember one parent, so this was obviously in 2020, the graduation. Elena's murder was in 2018, so we're only like a year and a half later, whatever. And I remember someone saying, "This is the worst thing that could ever happen to these kids." And I'm just looking at them like, like let's
Totally.
let's not overreact here. They're more resilient than we give them credit for, and it sucks. Like whatever it is, whether it was happening or not happening, whether we should have vaccinated or not, all of that goes aside. It's just the fact of it kind of sucks, and but it's where we are, and how do we own this and make the best of it and move forward from it and take it as a part of our story. We each all have our story in that way. And yeah, I remember with Alex after when he said that to me, I just apologized. I just said, "Hey, I'm sorry, but I didn't even know what to say." Like it was just, I mean, we were, and he goes, "It's okay." And like, so he
Totally.
said it and I apologized and it was like, okay, and so it's been kind of a cool moment for me to really kind of do it. Our joke now is whenever we say goodbye, because he goes to school in England for college, and every time we see each other, and if we get emotional, and we always joke around, and we're like, "Oh, damn allergies," like
Yeah,
because
yeah. It's
oh, my
cute.
allergies are going to get me when I
Yeah.
drop you off again today, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
really
totally.
it's really as a family, I can see why these incidents bring families together or they tear them apart.
Yep.
And
Totally.
like there's four things, there's four C's: communication, connection, commitment, and care, right? And when you look at, if you can't get the communication piece right, the connection and the commitment and the care for one another doesn't get doesn't get better. And I think that's where so many people, they just choose, like they choose to kind of try to isolate and do this and go, "I'm going to be strong, but I need to, do it on my own." And it's actually the exact opposite. You should actually embrace one another and love one, like you just said to us, which is a very, thank you so much. And it's one of those, when you allow others to love you, like we describe it as, we felt like, God just wrapped his arms around us through our community, through our friends, through our families. I mean, so many of them did things that just were unmatched. I mean, our closest friends went and picked out Elena's gravesite. Can you imagine going to pick out a gravesite for, well, you might because of what you do, but for a friend's
Right.
daughter,
No,
right? One
no.
that
Yeah.
like family,
Right.
and the burden that puts, but at the same time, it meant so much to us in that way. And So no,
Yeah. And that's like the complexity of death right there, is that it's like the deepest pain. Like I can cry just looking at you and like it, like, and not even being able to imagine all that you guys walk through, but how painful and the amount of suffering that that would have been. Yet you're met with this love that wouldn't have been there otherwise. This like your friends joining you in it, all of you weeping together, like, and I'm sure like even your family relationships, like you said, the bonding that comes. So it's this expansive experience, death, it opens us up as humans in wild ways.
it really does. I mean, that's a great quote to finish this on, Kelsey. I love that you came on. Thank you so much, and we look forward to. I look forward to hearing again. Maybe someday we'll have you back on, and we can make fun of Sean as much as you want. We could just have a whole episode on that, but I don't know it'd be about loss, love, and resilience. But no, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll see you soon.
Talk soon.